The bombing of Theramore, a controversial act committed by Garrosh that signified an all-out war with the Alliance and began to split the Horde apart. But how did this event occur? What happened before, during, and after the bombing? In this video, we will go over all of it. Before we get into this though, let me just say that before events escalate between the Horde and the Alliance, the Horde manages to steal the focusing iris from the blue dragonflight. This tool could be used as a weapon of mass destruction in itself, or be used to fuel other weapons of mass destruction. However, no one knew who took the focusing iris since its aura was masked and Caligos could not sense it. Seeking aid, he travels to Jaina at Theramore to help him locate it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So, following the Cataclysm, Garrosh assembles a very important meeting that all leaders of the Horde must attend. This meeting takes place in Grommash Hold, and it is the meeting where he announces that he will be leading an army to attack Northwatch, and following that, the army will move on to Theramore and burn it to the ground. Garrosh wanted to initiate a full-out war between both the Horde and the Alliance, but the reason why he wanted to target Theramore first was because it would be the most logical target. Without Theramore, all other remaining Alliance outposts on Kalimdor would fall, and therefore, Kalimdor would be rid of any Alliance presence and it would be a Horde-controlled continent. If Theramore fell and Garrosh's plans came through to fruition, not even the Night Elves would be able to stop him. However, this ignited an outburst from the Horde gathered. Some cheered, some booed, some claimed that Jaina was way too powerful to be challenged in her domain, while others such as Bane and Vol'jin didn't want a war between the Horde and the Alliance. In their eyes, Jaina was the most respected leader among all other Alliance leaders for how she tried to negotiate peace with the Horde in the past, and how she even helped Bane to reclaim Thunderbluff from the Grim Totem after his father's death, whereas Garrosh would not. Even Sylvanas was opposed to the war, for she was aware that if all-out war began with the Horde and the Alliance, then it would be inevitable that Varian would lead an army of soldiers to the Undercity and attack it. Garrosh, however, assured her that she would have the reinforcements that she needed when that time comes, but she didn't buy it. She then looked at Theramore. In her eyes, she pleaded with him to support her case, but he did not. He was loyal to the Horde, and he would do what the Horde needed of him. When all was done and it was verified that the Horde were to march on to Theramore, all left Grommash Hold, but as Theramore left, Garrosh pulled him aside and thanked him for his loyalty. However, Theramore merely responded by saying that the Horde was there when he needed him, so he would do the same for it, stating that his loyalty was not to Garrosh, but to the Horde as a whole. This answer wasn't the one Garrosh wanted to hear, but it would do for now. Later on that night, all of the Orcs and Horde members that had agreed with Bane and Vol'jin about not wanting to wage war were visited by Malkarok and the Kor'kron. All of those who dared disagreed with Garrosh were arrested, beaten, and a few of them even killed. Time passes and eventually the Horde army marches upon Northwatch Hold, the first target to be eliminated before moving on to Theramore. The fort held no chance against the Horde, for they were too many, and among many of the skilled fighters assaulting the tower were Bane, Vol'jin, Malkarok, and Garrosh himself. However, as the battle was coming to a conclusion, Garrosh decided to speed up his victory by commanding his shamans to raise up enslaved molten giants to decimate the Hold. Although this plan was highly successful, many Horde were outraged upon seeing this act. This was because enslaving elementals was something that was forbidden in the shamanistic art. It was an act of war against Mother Nature herself, and doing something like this could trigger a second cataclysm. Bane, who was pretty much a badass and who was no wimp or coward, challenged Garrosh non-stop throughout this campaign. He called him reckless for using such arts and stated that he could have caused a second cataclysm, but before he could get any further, Malkarok stepped up in his face and nearly challenged Bane to a Makara for questioning Garrosh. However, Bane, not fearing that he couldn't kill Malkarok, but instead fearing that a Makara at this point in time would only cause more distress in the Horde, he walked away, and stated that he only acted out of concern for the Horde and his people. However, this act by Garrosh only confirmed what Bane felt he needed to do since the war was announced in Grommash Hold. Bane called for one of his trusted messengers by the name of Perith Stormhoof, and secretly he tasked him with the mission of making his way to Theramore and warning Jaina of the Horde army. Time passes and Perith eventually turns up at Theramore. Upon hearing that he was sent by Bane, a trusted friend of Jaina's, Jaina let him in. and Perith told her everything. How Northwatch fell, how the Horde armies were vast beyond measure, and how Theramore would fall if the Horde today marched upon the Isle. He also told her of how Garrosh sought to have Kalimdor completely under Horde control, and told her that her aid in the time of where Cairn died had not been forgotten by Bane. It is for that very reason why Perith was warning her now today. Jaina, honored by this, told Perith that his chieftain was extremely honorable, and that this message will save countless innocent lives. With the conversation ending, Jaina also told Perith that he should rest assured knowing that no one will ever know that she received this information from him or from Bane. Perith smiled and said, "Now I understand my chieftain's choice even better, having met you." After this meeting with Perith, Jaina contacts Varian and the Kirin Tor, and both of them send their aid to help Theramore. Varian sending his elite generals, and Ronan and a group of elite magi sending their aid firsthand. However, the Kirin Tor is only there to fortify Theramore's defense since they are neutral. Kaligos himself initially tells Jaina that he has to think about getting involved since his main task at hand was to locate the Iris, not help the Alliance. Eventually, however, he tells her that he will fight, and he will get involved in the upcoming battle not only for the Alliance, but for Theramore's lady. At this news, Jaina was overwhelmed with joy. How could the Horde possibly stand up to them now? After the fall of Northwatch Hold, the entire army save Malkorok and the Korkron expected to march directly to Theramore to take advantage of their momentum and assault the city before it could fortify its defenses. However, instead, Garrosh had ordered his soldiers to make camp for days straight. This caused agitation and confusion among the troops, and as Bane and Vol'jin and the Forsaken and Cinderai commanders Frondus Farley and Kalantir Bloodblade were gathered in a secret meeting to discuss their thoughts on the matter, Malkorok, Garrosh, and the Korkron stumbled upon them. Garrosh grew angry, not believing that a group of his soldiers had gathered to speak behind his back, but Bane retorted by saying that the only reason that they were gathered was because Garrosh had refused to see them in the first place. Humul Runetotem then stated that Thrall would have seen them. Then Garrosh took a step forward and asked, "Does this look like the green skin of Thrall?" And at that moment, Humul Runetotem responded by saying, "No, no one would ever mistake you for Thrall." At this comment, Garrosh stated how he didn't know why people ever loved that peace-hungering shaman, and told the group that he had a plan, and when that time arrives, they would see their mistake for doubting him. Kalantir, however, interrupted him by asking him a question, but at this, Garrosh flat out punched her across the face, nearly knocking her to the ground. With this, he dispersed the group, and all went back into their tents. Time passes and finally the horn is sounded to march upon Theramore. Jaina along with her apprentice Kindi, the Kirin Tor, and Varian's finest however have managed to fortify the defenses. Regardless, Garrosh leads an assault on multiple fronts against the city. Malkorok leads a portion of the army assaulting the western gate. However, on the way there, he and his forces are ambushed by Jaina's bodyguard, a night elf named Pained, as well as many other Alliance soldiers. Many of Malkorok's soldiers end up dying, and he himself almost came close to being killed by Pained. However, even after an ambush, the Alliance soldiers are forced to retreat back to Theramore. On the other front, which was led by Garrosh, Vol'jin, and Bane, the Horde managed to push the Alliance back into the walls of Theramore. However, as the battle commenced, they caught sight of Kaligos trying to trap them in within the city. Before he could, however, Garrosh called for a retreat and every Horde soldier was called back from the battlefield. Cheers echoed from within Theramore as the Alliance claimed their victory. After meeting up in a spot a good distance away from Theramore, Bane was enraged, stating that the assault was a bloodbath, that countless soldiers died for no good reason, but Garrosh stated that everything had gone according to plan. He wanted Theramore to be filled to the brim with the Alliance. He wanted the Kirin Tor and Varian's elite to be there. Hell, it's even a plus that the Blue Dragon was there as well. In the horizon, a zeppelin carrying a mana bomb fueled by the focusing iris that Kaligos was searching for appeared. Seeing this, Kaligos immediately darted to the zeppelin, attempting to either claim the iris before it could amplify the effect of the mana bomb, or by attempting to detonate the bomb and sacrificing himself before it could hit Theramore. But before he could do either, cannons fired at him and threw him away. Ronan, seeing that many soldiers would die this day, including his own wife Varisa, decided to take action to prevent as much loss of life as possible. He conjured a portal leading to an island on the coast and threw Jaina through it. The last thing Jaina saw was Ronan stretching up his arms in an attempt to contain the mana bomb's explosion. His final act saved many lives who were in the outskirts of the battlefield, but all those who were in Theramore were killed on the spot. Viewing this from afar, Garrosh and the majority of the Horde cheered their victory cries, but others such as Vol'jin, Bane, Fandris, and Kalantir were horrified. In their eyes, this was a cowardly act. To kill their enemies from afar, to cheer while their foes died horrible deaths, to not only enslave the elements, but to also utilize weapons of mass destruction directly following the cataclysm, and on top of this, keeping it hidden from the rest of the Horde the entire time. Bane did not know what was worse. The fact that Garrosh had recklessly used these tools to achieve victory, or the fact that Garrosh could have done this the whole time without sacrificing a single Horde life in battle. Bane could not take it. He couldn't even bear to see such a dishonorable act before him. And so, he and his war braves walked away and turned their backs on the cheering Horde. Following this, Garrosh was true to his word about conquering Kalimdor. He immediately sent out orders to construct a blockade around Alliance ports so that they would be cut off from the outside world. No one would come to the Alliance's aid, and no Alliance would escape Kalimdor. In the meantime, however, Garrosh would celebrate his victory along with his soldiers. He ordered feasts and festivities to take place in Orgrimmar, not for one day, but for an entire week. Not everyone joined in, however. Bane, Vol'jin, Kalantir, and Fandris, as well as their troops, lingered in Razor Hill. Although the food tasted like ass there compared to the divine meals that Garrosh was eating in Orgrimmar, they just couldn't live with the fact that they took part in such a dishonorable act. Nor could they travel back to their homeland, since Garrosh had instructed that the army stay ready to be mobilized for when the time comes to assault the remaining Alliance outposts in Kalimdor. Back near Theramore, Jaina had been marked by the explosion. Even though she was in the process of mid-teleporting by the time the bomb hit, her hair was grey and her eyes glowed silver. Caligos, who survived the cannon fire, found her and was relieved that she was unharmed. However, as quick as he had found her, she left him to teleport to Theramore Isle, even despite his warnings that the arcane residue still lurking from the explosion will still be very dangerous. When she teleported there, she found only despair and agony. The bodies of dozens floated in the air, levitated by arcane magic. The body of Pain, her bodyguard, lay strewn about. The generals that Varian had sent all lay dead beneath her feet. And perhaps worst of all, was the body of her loving apprentice, Kindi. Before this battle, Jaina had traveled to Dalaran, had told Kindi's parents that she would be kept safe so long as Jaina still had breath in her. She had broke that promise. Kindi's body now laid before her, and as Jaina neared and touched the body of her dead apprentice, it crumbled to purple ash. A piercing scream of anguish, rage, and despair escaped from Jaina. Desperately, she tried to gather the dust of her apprentice, but there was no hope. In her eyes, this wasn't even murder. This was obliteration, done at a comfortable distance. Rage began to consume her. She looked around and saw the perfect targets to vent out her anger on. A scouting party of more than 30 orcs came into the area. They saw her, recognized who she was, and smiled. And then, like wolves stalking their prey, they crept in for the kill. However, Jaina was not the prey. She was the wolf. Arcane magic and magics of both ice and fire ignited from her fingertips. In moments, every single member of the party lay dead, all but one. But the remaining survivor was severely injured, and as he tried to crawl away from Jaina, Jaina turned him to face her. Your people are nothing more than rabid dogs. You spit on mercy, you shall have none. Garrosh wants carnage. He will get more blood than he ever bargained for. With that last statement, Jaina plunged a shard of a broken mirror into the orc's throat, but as he tried to roll away, Jaina held him and locked his head in place so that he was forced to see her and only her until he died. When the orc finally died, Jaina approached the focusing iris, and like the magi before her, she cloaked the focusing iris with her own aura. Only this time, it was hidden better, and Caligos would be none the wiser. She then traveled to Dalaran, where she asked the Kirin Tor for aid and to side with the Alliance and to assault Orgrimmar. While she was there, she also stole a book from the Kirin Tor's library, which held the secrets of how to unleash the true magics of the focusing iris. When the Kirin Tor called her back and announced their decision to her, they stated that even though they understood her actions, she was acting out of rage and hatred, and that was something that they could not take part in. Furious, she teleported to Stormwind, where she knew of one man who would share her hatred of the orcs. Upon arriving at Stormwind Keep, she met both Anduin and Varian, who were instantly overwhelmed with joy to see her. She, however, was still overwhelmed with rage. She called for the destruction of Orgrimmar, stated that all of the orcs were now drunk, were celebrating and gathered in the city and would be vulnerable. We could kill every single one of those green-skinned sons of Jaina! Anduin interrupted her, his eyes filled with pain at what he saw her become. Varian then told Jaina that he couldn't follow her path, that they needed to break the blockade, and plan ahead rather than just simply rushing headfirst into Orgrimmar. Jaina couldn't believe it. They both had turned their backs on her. I don't know what's happened to you, Varian, but you've turned into a coward. With that, she turned her back on both of them. Back in Razor Hill, Frondis and Kalantir are gathered at the inn. At that moment, however, Malkorok and his Korkron come into the inn, and Malkorok asks the two if they've been speaking ill of Garrosh behind his back. The two deny it, but Malkorok and his spies already heard all of it. You didn't say. It's too bad Cairn hadn't killed him when he had the chance. Or Thrall should return and kick Garrosh all the way to the Undercity, and it was cowardly to use the bomb at Theramore? You need better informants, Frondis replied. We do indeed, for it's obvious to me that none of you would ever say such things about Garrosh. I'm glad you understand that. Malkorok rose from his seat. Enjoy your drinks, he told Kalantir and Frondis, and then made his way out of the inn. The undead and Blood Elf both looked at each other, relieved that they were not arrested or attacked on sight, but their relief was quickly turned to caution as they realized that the innkeeper was missing. This didn't make sense since there were plenty of people still in the inn who were still waiting to be served. Kalantir and Frondis both looked at each other, and they both quickly ran to the door. Before they could, however, a frost grenade was thrown in which held them in place. As this happened, 3 more frag grenades were also thrown into the fray, killing every single person inside of the inn. Back in Stormwind, Varian had mobilized his generals and the fleet, as they all discussed their plan on how to assault Kalimdor. Even though everyone was enraged at the fact that Theramore was obliterated by the use of a mana bomb, every single person at the command table refused to take part in the same behavior against the Horde. All of them viewed it as cowardly, abominable, and Emissary Talon even stated that any being should forswear such an act, or else they might as well risk the very thing that makes it possible for mortals to commune with the light. At this, every person in the war room agreed, which brought them back to their plan. The first option was to send false word that the Alliance would attack the blockade at Feathermoon Stronghold, when in reality, their fleet would assault the blockade at Darkshore, free the ships there, and then continue on freeing the blockade around Kalimdor with more ships and soldiers at their disposal. However, Varian came up with a second plan. Leak the false attack on Darkshore while they attack Orgrimmar and cut off the head of the beast. It would already be more than believable since the Alliance has already leaked a false trail. And so the decision was made. The fleet set sail for Orgrimmar in an attempt to end the war with one of the first battles taking place inside of the capital. When the Alliance arrived, Garrosh was furious. He had gotten word that the Alliance would attack Darkshore, and so he sent the bulk of his ships to fortify the blockade already there. He would never think that the Alliance would be so ballsy as to attack Orgrimmar itself, but they did, and he, Garrosh, had to maintain a level head. And so he did. He pulled back his ships from Northwatch and had them confront the Alliance fleet. It was a total of 4 Horde ships fighting against literally dozens of Alliance ones. Without the Alliance ships even being touched, the first Horde ship was already torn apart by Varian's own ship. However, Garrosh had something in plan for the Alliance. With the help of enslaved Kraken, the Alliance fleet was torn apart. Kraken ripped apart ships, devoured those who fell into the sea, and what was once a few dozen ships versus 4 Horde ships became an all-out battle of chaos. And this battle was one that the Alliance was losing. They had been outsmarted, lured into a trap even though they had the element of surprise with them. Varian's ship was also destroyed. He was on top of a piece of floating debris, shouting out for the rest of the fleet to retreat. But when they reluctantly did so, numerous Kraken attacked them and trapped them. All hope was gone, and Varian had lost. Somewhere else, Jaina was nearing Orgrimmar. She had learned what she needed from the book she stole from Dalaran, and with that knowledge came power. Using the focusing iris, she enslaved not 1, not 2, but a legion of water elementals. She sought to use them the same way Garrosh did the Molten Giants, enslavement. With no choice but to obey her, she directed the wave towards Orgrimmar. At that moment, however, Thrall attempted to stop her. A few days earlier, he was granted a vision by the elements showing a great flood which would kill every single man, woman, and child in Orgrimmar. And so he made his way from the Maelstrom to her, attempting to stop this vision. This wave was the same one being conjured by Jaina. He called to her, asking her to stop, saying he understood her pain, but what she did right now would kill many, even children. Jaina, however, was as cold as ice. After he said this, she casted an arcane spell which knocked the breath out of him. However, the spell was not meant to incapacitate him, it was meant to kill him. Thrall had been lucky to survive. He began seeking the aid of the elements, asking the wind to hold the enormous wave of enslaved elementals back, but Jaina was too strong. Release the wind, Thrall. She had one hand on the iris, and another hand that glowed with arcane magic. Or I will kill you where you stand, and still you will fail. Do it! Turn your back on everything that once gave you integrity and compassion. Before she could though, Kalecgos located them. He had began to suspect that Jaina had took the focusing iris since once again, the aura of the iris was cloaked. Only better this time. It would have taken a veteran mage to pull off something like that. Kalecgos and Thrall together then began to attempt to talk Jaina out of her madness. Thrall asked if this was what she truly wanted to do, to commit the same cowardice act that Garrosh had done, and to have her people remember her for what she had done to Orgrimmar. She shook her head. I'm doing what I know is right, as did Arthas when he slaughtered everyone in Stratholme, Kalecgos said. But even he did not act with hatred in his heart to those he killed. Is that what you wish to be? Another Arthas or Garrosh? Jaina faltered. She fell to the ground, and the horrible truth came to her. By following this path, she would become another Garrosh or Arthas, and that was something she refused to let happen. Slowly she rose, still holding the iris. For what he has done, Garrosh can be nothing but my enemy, the Horde as well, so long as he is their war chief. I have hundreds of water elementals enslaved to me, and I will use them. Both Kalik and Thrall tensed, but she continued, I will use them to aid the Alliance fleet. I will not obliterate an entire city, for I am not Garrosh. I will not slaughter unarmed civilians, for I am not Arthas. I am my own master. With that having said, Thrall understood what she had to do, and bowed deeply, showing his gratitude and respect, and made way back to the Maelstrom where he would continue his work in healing the world. Kalecgos, however, escorted Jaina to Orgrimmar, and as she neared, she saw the wreckage of so many Alliance ships. Shock pierced her heart as she realized that if Thrall and Kalik had not stopped her, she would have killed her own people as well as the orcs in the great wave that she conjured. Upon seeing Varian in the water, Kalecgos picked him up so that he could see the entire battlefield. The tide had turned. Although many Alliance ships had been lost, the Kraken were now under attack by water elementals. Water elementals tore them apart and swarmed them, killing the last of the Kraken as well as destroying any remaining Horde ship. The Alliance fleet had been saved, and better yet, there was still enough to break the blockade surrounding the Alliance ports. Varian smiled and shouted, "To Northwatch!" Following this battle, the Alliance recaptures Northwatch and Garrosh is blown away at how far his plan has fallen. With Varian still holding enough ships to break through their blockade, Garrosh was forced to order a full retreat, freeing the Alliance of their ports. Once again, the Alliance had a stable foothold on Kalimdor, but loyalty in the Horde was on shaky grounds. The last thing Bane told Garrosh before the army was dispersed was this: I fight for the Horde. The true Horde, not one that uses methods both unnecessary and shameful. There must never be another Theramore, not if you wish the aid of Bane Bloodhoof.